I'm not good at this whole intro bullshit. So without further ado, I'm just going to show you how to make paper today where you can print shit on it from recycled materials. Yeah. So, in order to do this, you only need 4 things essentially. 4. Jug of water, some type of 2-part frame with mesh on it, a blender, and a handful of scrap paper. Step 1. Add your scrap paper to the blender. Add some water. Oh man. Blend the crap out of your paper. Let's go with it. The goal here is you want your paper as liquefied as possible. Yeah, it should be good. Next, you just have to add your paper smoothie right here to your giant jug of water. Now, pro tip here, the thickness of your paper is going to depend on your paper slurry to water ratio. What that ratio is for the best optimal paper, I don't know. I haven't played around with that enough, and I haven't bothered to measure anything. So, I guess toy that on your own. I think this is good for me though. That looks decent. And then make sure you stir it as much as possible for a good moment. That way you don't end up with giant clumps in your paper process in the final product. Something of that nature. So what we're really trying to do here is we're trying to suspend the paper fibers in this water paper slurry solution as evenly as possible. If you don't take the time to actually stir this up, what happens is you end up with giant clumps when you dip your paper in and out, and it causes issues when you get to trying to make a decent sheet of paper. We're not trying to make crap paper here for crafts, we're actually trying to make paper we can print on. I think that's good enough. Once you've got everything suspended, take your paper making jig, dip it into the water at an angle, let it sit there, and then slowly rise it up and capture your paper. Just like that, you have a sheet of paper on a mesh screen. Oh man, I forgot something. Shit. So at this point, once you've dipped your frame into the water, got your paper solution onto the frame, you can go ahead and take off the top portion of your paper making jig. If this video gets enough likes and views and stuff like that, I might actually show you how to make one of these paper making jigs. It's not that complicated. It's literally 2 frames with some screen stretched over it and pressed down tight. That's it. And these doohickeys here. Okay, with our still wet paper on our frame, there's a couple different ways to do this. I've seen people online be able to get this paper slurry mix off of this screen without having issues. The way I've been doing it, I've not been able to succeed in getting the paper away from the mesh without it destroying itself before it's dry. So I sit here and make one sheet of paper at a time and leave the paper on the mesh until I can find a way to remove them without everything going to shit. Man, that's gonna show up. So, what I do instead of trying to remove the paper slurry is I take a sponge and I lightly I forgot something important. No, do that. Okay, so I can fix it. It's gonna be character in our paper, minor imperfection. So what I do is I take it and dip it over, flip it upside down. And make sure none of your materials are hitting the edges of the paper. So what I've been doing is I've been flipping it upside down. I've been wicking the water away from the bottom of the screen with a sponge as much as I can. See, that's actually a decent amount of water that came out of that. Something I forgot in the beginning, a piece of craft felt is really handy. The paper doesn't stick to it too well and it absorbs moisture. So I'll show you jump cut inbound. Okay, so I forgot about the felt, but having a piece of craft felt is really handy because once you get your paper dipped, you can actually flip the thing over and lay it on the craft felt. And the paper, for the most part, does not stick to the craft felt. From here, what I like to do is I like to actually wick as much of the water away with a sponge as I can from the piece of paper. From the bottom side, not the top. Bring this over here so I'd be able to show you how much water actually comes out of it. The paper actually retains a lot of water afterwards. And that's after I've already dabbed it the second time. The first time. You can dab the bottom of this screen with the paper on it all day long as it's sitting on a piece of felt. But if you try to dab the top part of it, the paper's going to stick to the sponge and you're going to have to redo it. But from here, normally I just wait for the whole thing to dry. Remove the felt. What this also does, it helps to actually compress the paper a little bit to make it just a little bit thinner than what you would have otherwise had. Usually drying times is, for me, it's about a day at minimum before it's fully dry enough to do anything with. A couple hours might be able to pull it off the screen. I usually like to give it longer than that just in case. Okay, after waiting a couple of hours, should be ready to pull your freshly made paper off of. Good. Ow. No! I'm doing stuff, man. Come on. Get down. Get down. Go. Okay, so after waiting a couple of hours, paper's dry enough. Should be able to get it off the paper making screen. If we're lucky. Just have to pull it off as gently as you can. From one side to the other. And with that, you have your first sheet of handmade paper from recycled materials. Lay it on a piece of felt or something of that nature and let it completely dry. I like to let it dry and then sit it in between two books to flatten it out. Oh, I forgot something. But yeah, once you do that and you tinker with it, you can actually start to adjust the quality of the paper. This is construction paper like, it's kind of rough that I made. This one is pretty thin and flexible and around about the same as whatchamacallit, paper towels. It's about that thickness. And then this was good enough quality to print an image on in a printer. So the process works. This is my process, not any official how-to end-all be-all of how to make paper. Some basic tips or tricks I can give you here at the end is 1, experiment. Figure out what works for you. 2, if you mess up when you pull it off the sheet, because that happens all the time with the paper making screen, don't throw that messed up paper mush back into your dipping container because it creates lumps in the paper. 2, the recycled paper you're using, make sure you cut away any pieces of the paper that have ink on it. That way you don't end up with a gray, mushy like paper and you actually end up with some decently white paper. Don't use glossy paper and make sure you don't use anything with plastic in it. I've used a few envelopes that have plastic in it in the first few pieces I tried to make and it did not go well at all. Anyways, without further ado, that's all I have. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.